Welcome back, guys. It's Mary Shinigan with Get Busy Global. It's your first time here, welcome. This is the third part in the book series, The Power of Habit. Why we do what we do in life and business. And basically, I just take upwards of 30 minutes to read to you guys this book right here. And if not, give my own two-piece, just read straight. Please bear with me for some of the mess ups, the slip ups of the names, or just the extra time it takes, like if I lose track of something and then have to get back on track. It's free content, so hopefully there's not too much complaining. But without further ado, we're starting here today, and then we're just going until my ride gets back. So we're starting. The Craving Brain. You already know the vibes. 444. This is part 2, The Craving Brain, how to create new habits. The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business by Charles Duhigg. Again, this is Get Busy Global, Marius Shinigan, and we outside. You should already know what's going on by now. If not, just go tap in. Without further ado, we're just gonna get right to it, okay? So, boom, bow.
We're ready?
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 2, The Craving Brain, How to Create New Habits. One day in the early 1900s, a prominent American executive named Claude C. Hopkins was approached by an old friend with a new business idea. The friend had discovered an amazing product. He explained that he was convinced would be a hit. It was a toothpaste, a minty, frothy concoction he called Pepsodent. There were some dicey investors involved. One of them had a string of busted land deals. Another, it was rumored, was connected to the mob. But this venture, the friend promised, was going to be huge. If that is, Hopkins would consent to help design a national promotional campaign. Hopkins at the time was at the top of a booming industry that was hardly existed a few decades earlier, advertising. Hopkins was the man who had convinced Americans to buy Schlitz beer by boasting that the company cleaned their bottles with live steam, while neglecting to mention that every other company used the exact same method. He had seduced millions of women into purchasing Palmolive soap by proclaiming that Cleopatra had washed with it. Despite the sputtering protests of outraged historians, he had made puffed wheat famous by saying that it was shot from guns until the grains puffed to 8 times normal size. He had turned dozens of previously unknown products, Quaker Oats,
Cool.
Goodyear tires, the Bissell carpet sweeper, Van Camp's pork and beans, into household names, and in the process he had made himself so rich that his best-selling autobiography, My Life in Advertising, devoted long passages to the difficulties of spending so much money. Claude Hopkins was best known for a series of rules he coined explaining how to create new habits among consumers. These rules would transform industries and eventually become conventional wisdom among marketers, educational reformers, public health professionals, politicians, and CEOs. Even today, Hopkins' rules influence everything from how we buy cleaning supplies to the tools governments use for eradicating a disease. They are fundamental to creating any new routine. However, when his old friend approached Hopkins about Pepsodent, the ad man expressed only mild interest. It was no secret that the health of Americans' teeth was in steep decline. As the nation had become wealthier, people had started buying larger amounts of sugary processed foods. When the government started drafting men for World War I, so many recruits had rotting teeth that officials said poor dental hygiene was a national security risk. Yet, as Hopkins knew, selling toothpaste was financial suicide. There was already an army of door-to-door salesmen hawking dubious?
Where is it?
Dubious?
Yeah, dubious.
Dubious tooth powders and elixirs.
Elixirs.
Most of them going broke. The problem was that hardly anyone bought toothpaste because despite the nation's dental problems, hardly anyone brushed their teeth. It's horrible. So Hopkins gave his friend's proposal a bit of thought and then declined. He'd stick with soaps and cereals, he said. I did not see a way to educate the lady...
Lathy.
There's no H.
Lath, like L-A-I-T, like Lath. And then Y-C.
In technical toothpaste theories. Hopkins explained in his autobiography. You can start there.
Yeah.
The friend, however, was persistent. He came back again and again, appealing to Hopkins' considerable ego until eventually the ad man gave in. You take over? Oh. I finally agreed to undertake the campaign if he gave me a 6 months option on a block of stock, Hopkins wrote. The friend agreed. It would be the wisest financial decision of Hopkins' life. Within 5 years of that partnership, Hopkins turned Pepsodent into one of the best-known products on Earth and in the process helped create a toothbrushing habit that moved across America with startling speed. Soon everyone from Shirley Temple to Clark Gable was bragging about their Pepsodent smile. By 1930, Pepsodent was sold in China, South Africa, Brazil, Germany, and almost anywhere else Hopkins could buy ads. A decade after the first Pepsodent campaign, pollsters found that toothbrushing had become a ritual for more than half of the American population. Hopkins had helped establish toothbrushing as a daily activity. The secret to his success, Hopkins would later boast, was that he had found a certain kind of cue and reward that fueled a particular habit. It's an alchemy so powerful that even today the basic principles are still used by video game designers, food companies, hospitals, and millions of salesmen around the world. Eugene Pauly taught us about the habit loop, but it was Claude Hopkins that showed how new habits can be cultivated and grown. So what exactly did Hopkins do? He created a craving. And that craving, it turns out, is what makes cues and rewards work. That craving is what powers the habit loop.
Throughout his career, one of Claude Hopkins' signature tactics was to find simple triggers to convince consumers to use his products every day. He sold Quaker Oats, for instance, as breakfast cereal that could provide energy for 24 hours, but only if you ate a bowl every morning. He hawked tonics that cure stomach aches, joint pain, bad skin, and womanly problems, but only if you drank the medicine at symptoms' first appearance. Soon, people were devouring oatmeal at daybreak and chugging the little brown bottles whenever they felt a little hint of fatigue, which, as luck would have it, often happened at least once a day. To sell Pepsodent, then, Hopkins needed a trigger that would justify the toothpaste's daily use. He sat down with a pile of dental textbooks. It was dry reading, he later wrote, but in the middle of one book, I found a reference to the mucin plaques on teeth, which I afterward called the film. Now, quick pause on that. That's pretty cool that him as a marketer is taking the time to dive into somebody else's field, more specifically this dentist, and actually go through, and as I'm reading this book, read a dentist book and find whatever he's like. I think that's cool, and that's something that now I read in the book, so now I'm going to do. But that blows my mind. So that gave me an appealing idea. I resolved to advertise this toothpaste as a creative beauty. Oh, side note before I continue. Like, I already do things like when I'm in a grocery store, I'll look at like the latest magazines, or I'll like walk the aisles after I'm done shopping and literally just first take a pic of it and then maybe take it and like grab one that like actually captures me, flip through it, take pictures of like the best advertising campaigns. Because for me, I'm always thinking of what like that's new, that's out there, that's just a tip I've learned. And you know, same thing off of like TV ads or anything that's just really striking, or as I'm driving, like I'm always on the lookout just because my brain's kind of wired that way. So yeah, that was just a little more build up on this part, but I'm gonna keep it going. To deal with that cloudy film and focusing on tune film, Hopkins was ignoring the fact that this same film has always covered people's teeth and hadn't seemed to bother anyone. The film is naturally occurring The film is a naturally occurring membrane that builds up on the teeth regardless of what you eat or how often you brush. People have never paid much attention to it, and there was little reason why they should. You can get rid of the film by eating an apple, running your finger over your teeth, brushing, or vigorously swirling the liquid around your mouth. Toothpaste didn't do anything to help remove the film. In fact, one leading dental researchers at the time said that all toothpastes, particularly Pepsodent, were worthless. Isn't that crazy? That's what they say, an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. That didn't stop Hopkins from exploiting his discovery. Here he decided it was a cue that could trigger the habit. Soon cities were plastered with Pepsodent ads. Just run your tongue across your teeth, read one, you'll feel a film. That's what makes your teeth look off color and invites decay. Note how many pretty teeth are seen everywhere, read another ad featuring beautiful smiles. Millions are using a new method of teeth cleansing. Why would any woman have dingy film on her teeth? Pepsodent removes the film.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, the fact that they was able to just say this, like, you can't say this on Facebook, I feel like. I don't know, like, it's a little, it's I don't know, you're gonna have to spin that, but I like that. I'm not even going, this is a different video, but hold up. The brilliance of these appeals was that they relied upon a cue, tooth film, that was universal and impossible to ignore. Telling someone to run their tongue across their teeth, it turned out, was likely to cause them to run their tongue across their teeth. I mean, he told them to. And when they did, they were likely to feel the film. Hopkins had found a cue that was simple, had existed for ages, and was so easy to trigger that an advertisement could cause people to comply automatically. Pause the video. Had to execute on that cue response reward, so I just did a little one for my increased client flow business. Now back to the book.
Moreover, the reward, as Hopkins envisioned it, was even more enticing. Who, after all, doesn't want to be more beautiful? Who doesn't want a prettier smile? Particularly when all it takes is a quick brush with Pepsodent. After the campaign launched, a quiet week passed. Then, too, in the third week, demand exploded. There were so many orders for Pepsodent that the company couldn't keep up. In 3 years, the product went international, and Hopkins was crafting ads in Spanish, German, and Chinese. Within a decade, Pepsodent was one of the top-selling goods in the world and remained America's best-selling toothpaste for more than 30 years. Before Pepsodent appeared, only 7% of Americans had a tube of toothpaste in their medicine chests. A decade after Hopkins' ad campaigns went nationwide, the number had jumped to 65% by the end of World War II. By the end of World War II, the military downgraded concerns about recruits' teeth because so many soldiers were brushing every day. I made for myself $1 million on Pepsodent, Hopkins wrote a few years after the product appeared on shelves. The key, he said, was that he learned the right human psychology. That psychology was grounded in two basic rules. First, find a simple and obvious cue. Second, clearly define the rewards. If you get those elements right, Hopkins promised, it was like magic. Look at Pepsodent. He had identified a cue, tooth film, and a reward, beautiful teeth, that had persuaded millions to start a daily ritual. Even today, Hopkins' rules are a staple of marketing textbooks and the foundation of millions of ad campaigns. And those same principles have been used to create thousands of other habits, often without people realizing how closely they are hewing to Hopkins' formula. Studies of people who have successfully started new exercise routines, for instance, show they are more likely to stick with a workout plan if they choose a specific cue, such as running as soon as they got home from work, and a clear reward, such as a beer or an evening of guilt-free television. Research on dieting says creating new food habits requires a predetermined cue, such as planning menus in advance and simple rewards for dieters when they stick to their intentions. The time has come when advertising has in some hands reached the status of a science, Hopkins wrote. Advertising, once a gamble, has thus become, under able direction, one of the safest of business ventures. It's quite a boast, however. It turns out that Hopkins' 2 rules aren't enough. There's also a third rule that must be satisfied to create a habit. A rule so subtle that Hopkins himself relied on it without knowing it existed. It explains everything from why it's so hard to ignore a box of donuts to how a morning jog can become a nearly effortless routine. The scientists and marketing executives at Procter & Gamble were gathered around a beat-up table in a small windowless room, reading the transcript of an interview with a woman who owned 9 cats when one of them finally said what everyone was thinking. If we get fired, what exactly happens, she asked. Do security guards show up and walk us out, or do we get some kind of warning beforehand? The team's leader, a one-time rising star within the company named Drake Stimson, stared at her. I don't know, he said. His hair was a mess, his eyes were tired. I never thought things would get this bad. They told me running this project was a promotion. It was 1996, and the group at the table was finding out, despite Claude Hopkins' assertions, how utterly unscientific the process of selling something could become. They all worked for one of the largest consumer goods firms on earth, the company behind Pringles potato chips, Oil of Olay, Bounty paper towels, CoverGirl Cosmetics, Dawn, Downy, and Duracell, as well as dozens of other brands. P&G collected more data. Oh, P&G is Procter & Gamble. Collected more data than almost any other merchant on earth and relied on complex statistical methods to craft their marketing campaigns. The firm was incredibly good at figuring out how to sell things. In the clothes washing market alone, P&G's products cleaned 1 out of every 2 laundry loads in America. Its revenues topped $35 billion per year. However, Stimson's team, which had been entrusted with...
You said $35 billion a year?
Yeah. Which had been entrusted with designing the ad campaign for one of P&G's most promising new products, was on the brink of failure. The company had spent millions of dollars developing a spray that could remove bad smells from almost any fabric, and the researchers in that tiny windowless room had no idea how to get people to buy it. The spray had been created about 3 years earlier when one of P&G's chemists was working with a substance called hydroxypropyl beta-cyclodextrin, or HPBCD, in a laboratory. The chemist was a smoker. His hydroxypropyl beta-cyclodextrin, or HPBCD, in a laboratory. The chemist was a smoker. His clothes usually smelled like an ashtray. One day, after working with HPBCD, his wife greeted him at the door when he got home. Did you quit smoking? She asked him. No, he said. He was suspicious. She had been harassing him to give up cigarettes for years. This seemed like some kind of reverse psychology trickery. You don't smell like smoke, is all, she said. The next day he went back to the lab and started experimenting with HPBCD and various scents. Soon he had hundreds of vials containing fabrics that smelled like wet dogs, cigars, sweaty socks, Chinese food, musty shirts, and dirty towels. When he put HPBCD in water and sprayed it on the samples, the scents were drawn into the chemical's molecules. After the mist dried, the smell was gone. When the chemist explained his findings to P&G's executives, they were ecstatic. For years, market research had said that consumers were clamoring for something that could get rid of bad smells, not mask them, but eradicate them all together. When one team of researchers had interviewed customers, they found that many of them left their blouses or slacks outside after a night at a bar or party. My clothes smell like cigarettes when I got home, but I don't want to pay for dry cleaning every time I go out, one woman said. P&G, sensing an opportunity, launched a top-secret project to turn HPBCD into a viable product. They spent millions perfecting the formula, finally producing a colorless, odorless liquid that could wipe out almost any foul odor. The scientist behind the spray was so advanced that NASA would eventually use it to clean the interiors of shuttles after they returned from space. The best part was that it was cheap to manufacture, didn't leave stains, and could make any stinky couch, old jacket, or stained car interior smell, well, scentless. The project had been a major gamble, but P&G was now poised to earn billions if they could come up with the right marketing campaign. They decided to call it Febreze and asked Stimson, a 31-year-old wonderkind with a background in math and psychology.
That's cap, because Febreze doesn't eliminate that shit. That commercial's a lie. Like, bro, Febreze literally just keeps the smell of it. Like, I don't know.
It masks it, like they just said.
No, but it said it doesn't mask it.
Yeah.
It said it eliminates it, which is cap, because it doesn't.
Yeah.
Febreze doesn't eliminate smells, bro. I was waiting to see what that shit was, and I'm disappointed that it was Febreze, because that shit doesn't work.
A 31-year-old wonderkind with a background in math and psychology to lead the marketing team. Stimson was tall and handsome, with a strong chin, a gentle voice, and a taste for high-end meals. I'd rather my kids smoke weed than eat at McDonald's, he once told a colleague. Before joining P&G, he had spent 5 years on Wall Street building mathematical models for choosing stocks. When he relocated to Cincinnati, where P&G was headquartered, he was tapped to help run important business lines, including Bounce fabric softener and Downy dryer sheets. But Febreze was different. It was a chance to launch an entirely new category.
These are all
of product.
Procter & Gamble companies, I believe.
Yeah. To add something to a consumer's shopping cart that had never been there before. All Stimson needed to do was figure out how to make Febreze into a habit, and the product will fly off the shelves. How tough could that be? Stimson and his colleagues decided to introduce Febreze. What?
They need a cue, but I'm listening.
Stimson and his colleagues decided to introduce Febreze in a few test markets: Phoenix, Salt Lake City, and Boise. They flew in and handed out samples, and then asked people if they could come by their homes. Over the course of 2 months, they visited hundreds of households. Their first big breakthrough came when they visited a park ranger in Phoenix. She was in her late 20s and lived by herself. Her job was to trap animals that wandered out of the desert. She caught coyotes, raccoons, and the occasional mountain lion, and skunks. Lots and lots of skunks, which often sprayed her when they were caught. I'm single, and I'd like to find someone to have kids with, the ranger told Stimson and his colleagues while they sat in her living room. I go on a lot of dates. I mean, I think I'm attractive, you know, I'm smart, and I feel like I'm a good catch.
But you smell like skunk.
But her love life was crippled. She explained, because everything in her life smelled like skunk. Her house, her truck, her clothing, her boots, her hands, her curtains, even her bed. She had tried all sorts of cures. She bought special soaps and shampoos. She burned candles and used expensive carpet shampooing machines.
That's a make-though.
None of it worked. When I'm on a date, I'll get a whiff of something that smells like skunk and I'll start obsessing about it, she told them. I'll start wondering, does he smell it? What if I bring him home and he wants to leave? I went on 4 dates last year with a really nice guy. A guy I really liked, and I waited forever to invite him to my place. Eventually came over and I thought everything was going really well. Then the next day he said he wanted to take a break. He was really polite about it, but I kept wondering, was it the smell?
Well, I'm glad you got the chance to try Febreze, Stimson said. How'd you like it? She looked at him. She was crying. I want to thank you, she said. This spray has changed my life. After she had received samples of Febreze, she had gone home and sprayed her couch. She sprayed the curtains, the rug, the bedspread, her jeans, her uniform, the interior of her car. The bottle ran out, so she got another one and sprayed everything else. I've asked all my friends to come over, the woman said. They can't smell it anymore. The skunk is gone. By now, she was crying so hard that one of Stimson's colleagues was patting her on the shoulder. Thank you so much, the woman said. I feel so free. Thank you. This product is so important. Stimson sniffed the air inside her living room. He couldn't smell anything. We're going to make a fortune with this stuff, he thought. Stimson and his team went back to P&G headquarters and started reviewing a marketing campaign they were about to roll out. The key to selling Febreze, they decided, was conveying that sense of relief the park ranger felt. They had to position Febreze as something that would allow people to rid themselves of embarrassing smells. All of them were familiar with the Claude Hopkins rules, or the modern incarcerations that fill business schools' textbooks. They wanted to keep the ad simple, find an obvious cue, and clearly define the reward. They designed 2 television commercials. First showed a woman talking about the smoking section of a restaurant. Whenever she eats there, her jacket smelled like smoke. A friend tells her if she uses Febreze, it'll eliminate the odor. The cue, the smell of cigarettes. The reward, odor eliminated from clothes. The second ad featured a woman worrying about her dog, Sophie, who always sits on the couch. Sophie will always smell like Sophie, she says, but with Febreze, now my furniture doesn't have to. The cue, pet smells, which are familiar to the 70 million households with animals. The reward, a house that doesn't smell like a kennel. Stimson and his colleagues began airing the advertisements in 1966 in the same test cities. Stimson and his colleagues began airing the advertisements in 1996 in the same test cities. They gave away samples, put advertisement in mailboxes, and paid grocers to build mountains of Febreze near cash registers. Then they sat back, anticipating how they would spend their bonuses. A week passed, then 2, a month, 2 months. Sales started small and got smaller. Panicked, the company sent researchers in the stores to see what was happening. Shelves were filled with Febreze bottles that had never been touched. They started visiting housewives who had received the free samples. Oh yes, one of them told P&G researchers, the spray. I remember it. Let's see. The woman got down on her knees in the kitchen and started rooting through the cabinet underneath the sink. I used it for a while, but then I forgot about it. I think it's back here somewhere. She stood up. Maybe it's in the closet? She walked over and pushed aside some brooms. Yes, here it is. It's in the back, see? It's still almost full. Did you want it back? Febreze was a dud. For Stimson, this was a disaster. Rival executives in other divisions sensed an opportunity in his failure. He heard whispers that some people were lobbying to kill Febreze and get him reassigned to Nikki Clark Hair Products, the consumer goods equivalent of Siberia. One of P&G's divisional presidents called an emergency meeting and announced they had to cut their losses on Febreze before board members started asking questions. Stimson's boss stood up and made an impassioned plea. There's still a chance to turn everything around, he said. At the very least, let's ask the PhDs to figure out what's going on. P&G had recently snapped up the scientists from Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, and elsewhere who were supposed experts in consumer psychology. The division's president agreed to give the product a little more time. So a new group of researchers joined Stimson's team and started conducting more interviews. Their first inkling of why Febreze was failing came when they visited a woman's house outside Phoenix. They could smell her 9 cats before they went inside. The house's interior, however, was clean and organized. She was somewhat of a neat freak, the woman explained. She vacuumed every day and didn't like to open her windows since the wind blew in dust. When Stimson and the scientists walked in her living room where the cats lived, the scent was so overpowering that one of them gagged. "What do you do about the cat smell?" a scientist asked the woman. "It's usually not a problem," she said. "How often do you notice the smell?" "Oh, about once a month," the woman replied. The researchers looked at one another. "Do you smell it now?" scientists asked. "No." The same pattern played out in dozens of other smelly homes the researchers visited. People couldn't detect most of the bad smells in their lives. If you live with flying cats, you become desensitized to their scent. If you smoke cigarettes, it damages your olfactory capacity so much that you can't smell smoke anymore. Scents are strange. Even the strongest fade with constant exposure. That's why no one was using Febreze, Stimson realized. The product's Q, the thing that was supposed to trigger daily use, was hidden from the people who needed it most. Bad scents simply weren't noticed frequently enough to trigger a regular habit. As a result, Febreze ended up in the back of a closet. The people with the greatest proclivity to use the spray never smelled the odors that should have reminded them the living room needed a spritz. Stimson's team went back to headquarters and gathered the windowless conference room, rereading the transcript of the woman with the 9 cats. The psychologist asked, "What happens if you get fired?" Stimson put his hand in his head. If he couldn't sell Febreze to a woman with 9 cats, he wondered, who could he sell it to? How do you build a new habit when there's no cue to trigger usage, and when the consumers who need it don't appreciate the reward? The laboratory belonging to Wolfram Schultz, a professor of neuroscience at the University of Cambridge, is not a pretty place. His desk has been alternately described by colleagues as a black hole where documents are lost forever, and a petri dish where organisms can grow, undisturbed and wild in proliferation for years. When Schultz needs to clean something, which is uncommon, he doesn't use sprays or cleaners. He wets a paper towel and wipes it hard. If his clothes smell like smoke or cat hair, he doesn't notice or care. And guys, we're going to end it there.